Hello, fantasy sports fans, and welcome to MFSN, the Hub's weekly fantasy sports Q&A. I'll be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. My name is Casey Scheinvold, and I'm joining you here from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It is the dead of summer. It's very hot out here. I'm assuming it's very hot out where many of you are right now. And baseball is in full swing. There's a lot of things going on right now. Obviously, the All-Star starters were just announced. We can talk about those if you'd like. There's plenty of questions relevant to fantasy baseball. There's news happening every day there, injuries and suspensions and people playing well or tanking at the wrong time. So feel free to ask me questions. As always, if you're watching, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, leave comments below because we love to answer questions from our fans. I'll start with our first question, which is, should I trade Cody Bellinger for Wander Franco? It's a three-keeper league, so it's kind of a redraft, but it's also a keeper league because you can keep three players from 1 year to the next. Cody Bellinger has been atrocious for the last year and a half, respectively. He was hurt the beginning of this year, but since he's come back, his numbers have been terrible, and he's playing mostly outfield. I'm not sure if he's gotten any games at first base or not, so I don't know if he'll have dual position eligibility next year. Right now, he qualifies at both first base and outfield. If you're in a league that plays multiple outfield positions, he probably qualifies in both center and right field to go along with first base. Wander Franco, as many people know, is the number one prospect who was called up a few weeks ago by the Tampa Bay Rays. A shortstop, although he's played some third base for them. I assume he'll play some second and short as well, so he might get multi-position eligibility. He's considered an elite bat-to-ball skill guy with power and speed. In a keeper league, to answer your question, I absolutely would make that deal. I think Cody Bellinger's MVP season of a couple years ago was epic and might never be repeated. But to get the potential in a keeper league of a 21-year-old or 20-year-old, I'm not even sure if he's 21 yet, who can produce that way and has the same potential as Bellinger at a position where it is more valuable is a no-brainer to me. I would trade him in a heartbeat in a keeper league. He has been struggling or scuffling since his call-up. I know he had a big debut with a 3-run home run. Since then, he hasn't been hitting very well, but his walk-to-strikeout ratio is still pretty good. His sprint speed measurements have been good, and his contact rate is still pretty good. I didn't check his batting average on balls in play to see if he's just been unlucky, but it's not like he's not doing what we thought he could. He's just not getting the results yet. So I believe he's going to be a high level keeper this year and could be dominant by 2022 or 2023. So it's a really good trade, I think, if you can do that. With regards to Cody Bellinger, I have to admit I swung and missed on this one. I gave him a pass on 2020 with the shortened pandemic year. He had a bad year last year. I still thought of him as a top 3 or 4 first baseman and a top 10 outfielder. I thought he would bounce back after he had such an epic year in 2019. But I might have to agree that he's a little overrated at this point, that you're getting the production from somebody like Jared Walsh, who you could have gotten 10 rounds later, that you would hope to have gotten out of Cody Bellinger. And that, to me, when you're a first or second round pick, if you're not producing like a top 5 at your primary position, you're pretty much overrated. So I'm going to say, yes, trade him or get what you can for him. His name still carries a lot of value. And so see if you own him, try to trade him for something based on his name value. Ross, with your question, absolutely. If you can get Wander Franco in a keeper league, I'd rather have him going forward than Cody Bellinger. I wanted to talk a little bit about the All-Stars. They were just announced, and it relates to some of the questions that I've been asked. The AL All-Stars are pretty exciting right now. You got Salvador Perez, who might be the best catcher fantasy-wise in baseball right now. It's his 6th starting game in the All-Star game, 6th time he's a starter in the All-Star game. But he's got over 20 home runs right now, or 19 home runs. He's crushing the ball. He doesn't seem to age like most catchers do because he's getting up there in years, a little long in the tooth. He's the only holdout from their great teams in the mid 2000 teens, where they made it to the World Series and then won the World Series. They got rid of Hosmer. Well, not got rid of him. They let him go to San Diego. Gordon retired. So a lot of those kind of stalwarts from that team, Ben Zobrist was on one of those teams. They've all gone, and the one they've held on to was Salvador Perez, and they seem like a genius for it right now. He might be the best catcher in fantasy. I always like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa because of his eligibility at catcher, even though he doesn't really play catcher and he steals bases. That's pretty valuable considering the commodity, the value of the steals commodity. But I have to say that Perez is playing better right now. The other NL starting catcher is another old guy, and that's Buster Posey. We usually see, the only old guys who age well are for defensive reasons, the Yadi Molinas of the world. I think Jorge Posada, if you go back in the day, I'm a Yankees fan, so I always refer to the Yankees. They tend to taper off in their later years with any offensive production. But Posey is playing great. He's .330 with 12 home runs, as many home runs as he hit all combined in 2018 and 19 together. So again, another fountain of youth. As my team name in all of my fantasy baseball leagues is Vlad to the Bone. I'm a huge Vladimir Guerrero Jr. fan. I've owned him since he was a minor leaguer in Toronto's in my keeper league, and wouldn't trade him even before he got called up. He had a couple lean years his first 2 years, but I believed in him, and now he's paying me back tenfold with his MVP type of stats. I don't think he's the MVP right now, but he's playing awesome. And then Freddie Freeman, who might be the best all-around first baseman. So there's a lot of really good players playing in the All-Star game this year. That's just a few. We can touch on more later. To go back, one of the questions here is about Danny Duffy. Is he worth picking up? That's a tough question. Danny Duffy's been around a long time. He was a high-rated prospect coming out up in the Royals system. When he came out, he was this left-handed, diminutive kind of left-hander who just had some real gas on his fastball, but could also mix and pick spots. They predicted a lot of great things. He's been pretty average for a couple of years. He's pitching pretty well right now. Given the uncertainty of pitching, I would probably pick him up. I mean, because you look at who's on the DL. You got Tyler Glasnow. You got Shane Bieber. You got Corey Kluber. Who else is there's a bunch that are on the DL or IL. I'm sorry for those purists who want to make sure I'm getting the terminology correct. It's the injured list, not the disabled list anymore. And so Duffy is worth a flyer, particularly if you're one of those teams. I have one team where I've been bit by the injury bug with Glasnow and Flaherty on the same team. And so you're trying to fill the gap or buy time until it's okay, until you can get those guys back in. I think Danny Duffy is absolutely worth it there. Tony Todd, I'm wrong. You should not trade Bellinger. Well, for all of you who don't know, Tony Todd has a great program on this network called Throwing Heat. He is a very talented and funny man, but he is absolutely wrong about Bellinger. I think on this in a keeper league, I'm going to have to call you. I think you're right. He has only been in the league for 2 minutes. And if you don't get him now, you're not going to get him. And I think if you I'd rather get somebody too soon and wait a year or two, like I did with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., than hold on to somebody a year or two too long and end up having no value for him. And so I think Bellinger is absolutely tradable in that sense, because even if Wander Franco struggles this year, you can always turn around and trade him next year because prospects hold their value for an incredible amount of time when they're as hyped as he is. So, Tony, I'm going to disagree with you there. Who do you think will be the starting pitchers for the All-Star game? Jackson, that's a good question. In the National League, I think it has to be Jacob deGrom if he's healthy. I just think he is the best pitcher in baseball. The numbers he's putting up are the kind you see in video games. It's just amazing. In the American League, people would expect somebody like a Garrett Cole, although he's been getting rocked lately. I'm going to throw a name out there that not a lot of people would think should start, and that's Carlos Rodon in Chicago, the White Sox. He has had this resurgent year as a lefty. He was another one similar to Danny Duffy, who when he was coming up in the minor leagues was super highly rated and thought to be the ace coming out of the draft, like that he was just going to climb his way up. And for the first handful of years he was in the league, he had such control issues and command issues that he would walk too many players, get into bad counts, and then get hit pretty hard. This year, he seems to have managed his control and his command, and his slider is filthy. So I would really prefer, I think he would be a neat story because he's somebody who isn't what people expect. Ross pointed out that deGrom has decided not to play in the All-Star game. I guess that's because he's been dealing with injuries. That makes a lot of sense. He's had some shoulder and elbow injuries throughout the year, so he wouldn't be playing. Then if I had to pick another one, it would probably be probably one of the Milwaukee starters. That's Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff. One of those two. Probably Woodruff would be my pick. He's a great pitcher, doing a lot of great starts right now in Milwaukee, and he can help everybody win. Yes, Rodon has had a couple bad starts, but I don't think that undoes what he did the whole for 3 months of the season. 2 bad starts doesn't make it. The closer situation in Philadelphia is really interesting because last year, if you remember, they had one of the worst bullpens historically of any team in Major League history, with over like a 7 ERA, I think, for their bullpen. So they made some moves this offseason, bringing in Archie Bradley, signing Jose Alvarado, and trying to shore up that bullpen. And all of the experts, quote unquote, and I probably would fall in that, thought they did a great job because I think Jose Alvarado is great. Archie Bradley, they thought was the closer in waiting in Arizona, but he didn't pan out. He got moved around. But Hector Neris, Jose Alvarado, and Archie Bradley have not been reliable. They've blown as many saves, I believe, as they've made, and their whips are really bad. They walk a lot of players, I think. Ranger Suarez, for those of you who don't know, is a young guy who wasn't called up too long ago, who's just been lights out, under a 1 ERA, under a 1 whip, almost a strikeout per inning. He doesn't strike out as many as as many as Neris and Alvarado do. Alvarado's the strikeout specialist of that group. But I don't know if Suarez is the closer. He's never pitched in the high leverage. He hasn't been a high leverage relief pitcher for a long time. And as we all know, it gets a lot harder in the 8th and 9th innings to put up those numbers than it is in the 6th and 7th. So I do think he might be next in line to get saves. And if I was to recommend a waiver wire pickup of anybody in the Phillies bullpen, it would probably be him. But I still think Alvarado or Neris are going to end up the closer long-term. They're going to be kind of like Fernando Rodney. For those of you who don't remember him, he was with a bunch of teams, the Angels, Minnesota. I think he was in Arizona for a while. He managed to get 30 to 32 saves, it felt like, every year, but he had over a 4 ERA and almost a 2 whip. It was just one of those roller coaster types of situations. I think Philadelphia is going to have to deal with that for the rest of this year. So I don't know who they're going to pick up if they can. Kershaw, do I think Kershaw can start in the All-Star game? I certainly think he can start. I mean, he's a great pitcher historically. I know that Walker Buehler got lit up yesterday or the day before. I think it might have been yesterday, but I don't think Kershaw is necessarily one of the top ones I would pick to start the All-Star game. Although, again, for any of these guys, it's just 1 or 2 innings and they're done, so you can start anybody. But I think Woodruff earned it over Kershaw. Any speculation? Wait, no. Thoughts on Gleyber Torres? Ugh. Now, I'm a Yankees fan. So, as you can see by the poster behind me, Gleyber Torres 2 years ago hit like 39 home runs when he was playing second base for the Yankees. He was young, this highly touted. He was the one we traded Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs several years ago when the Cubs won the World Series to get. He was supposed to be kind of the future of the Yankees, and he's been terrible the last 2 years. I don't think he's a natural shortstop. I watch a lot of Yankees games, and I don't think he's the best option we have. I think, if anything, he's a second baseman. That's where he's more comfortable defensively, and his numbers were better. But if you look at the numbers, even from 2 years ago when he hit like 35 or more home runs, I think like 17 of them were against the Baltimore Orioles. It was some ridiculous number that he raked one team all year and was still well above average, but didn't rake everybody else as well. I don't think he's the future. If I were Brian Cashman and GM of the Yankees, he would be one of the players I would be looking to trade. I could talk the entire time about the moves I would make for the Yankees. I don't think they're well constructed right now. They're certainly not well constructed as a playoff team. I think they might make the playoffs. They probably will because they'll mash for periods of time and score enough runs, but they don't have the starters right now. Aroldis Chapman might as well be playing kickball and rolling the ball down to these batters the size of the way he's pitched. I think he's gotten like one out and gave up 7 earned runs in the last week or so. It's a ridiculous number. Chad Green, for those who are watching, is the guy to own in that bullpen right now. I think I suspect that Chapman might end up on the DL for 10 days with a fatigue or of his elbow or his shoulder just to get his mechanics straightened out. And Chad Green is going to be the closer in that time. He had an immaculate inning on Sunday. For those of you who don't know, an immaculate inning is three batters faced, 3 strikeouts and only 9 pitches. It doesn't happen very often. It was something Craig Kimbrell was really famous for when he was at his peak as a closer for the Braves and stuff. But Chad Green did it last week, and he's just been impressive. So let's see. Wow, lots of questions. I like it. Who do I think will win the All-Star game? Jack, I barely watch the All-Star game. I like statistics when it comes to the All-Stars as opposed to the game. I do like the NL's roster a little bit better. I was just looking at that a few minutes ago, and I think that you're looking at, Freddie Freeman, you got Nolan Arenado, you got Fernando Tatis Jr. in the outfield. You got some great names like Jesse Winker, who's just in the All-Star consideration this year. Nick Castellanos started off great. Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the most exciting players in the game. They have the more dominant roster. So if it was going just on roster, I would certainly pick the NL, but who knows? That's just what it could be. Jesse Winker for Aaron Nola and Christian Yelich, or just stick with them. So I take it that means you have Nola and Yelich. I'm worried about both of them. I own Christian Yelich. I've owned him for years in a keeper league. I rode the good years in 18 and 19. I'm stuck with him through the lean years here. If I could get Jesse Winker for Yelich right now, that's tempting. I mean, he won't run as much as Yelich does, and Yelich, when he's healthy, is almost a 30-30 guy. Winker is not going to run, but Yelich has back issues, and back issues just scare the crap out of you when it comes to being healthy for periods of time. It means a lot more days off, maybe a lot more trips to the IL. Aaron Nola is one of the 10 to 20 best pitchers in the game, but he's not pitching like it right now. If it's a redraft league, I think I would make that trade. In a keeper league, I might ride Nola and Yelich and see if they can regain some value in that. Shohei, the hitter for Vlad Jr. Well, look, as I've said before, I am a Vlad Jr. apologist. He's one of my favorite, if not my favorite player in the game. So I wouldn't make that trade emotionally. When you look at it on the surface, Otani has more home runs and he has more steals because he's fast. I don't know if he's gained outfield eligibility or not. I'd have to look that up. If he has, it becomes a viable trade offer. But Guerrero Jr. is hitting 50 points higher, only 2 behind him in home runs, is going to be a consistent source in 4 categories, everything but steals. And he qualifies this year at first and third base, and qualifying at both corner infield spots, I think is much more valuable than qualifying in the outfield and at the utility spot. So I probably wouldn't trade Vladdy Jr. for Shohei. I think I'll drop Gavin Lux and add Brendan Rodgers. Gavin Lux, they're 2 very similar players. Gavin Lux hasn't been up as long. Brendan Rodgers feels like he's been up for a few years and just had some rough years. But he's in Colorado and he's playing every day and he's starting to show it. And I like offensive players in Colorado, so I might do that. I think Gavin Lux might be a better ball player, But for fantasy purposes, I think Brendan Rodgers might be more reliable right now, and hits in a better ballpark day in and day out. So I would probably do that. Adalberto Mondesi. This is, I have a couple players on my team who I can't wait to get in the lineup, but I don't think I ever will, and that's Byron Buxton and Adalberto Mondesi. And I kind of package them together because they are these two elite talents with power and speed to change the game. They can single-handedly win you the steals in a rotisserie league. Byron Buxton has found the power stroke the past year and a half, but they're always hurt, and they always have been. Mondesi came back for like 3 games and then went back on the DL. Buxton came back and got hit in a pitch in like his second or third game back and now has a broken hand. I don't know if he's ever going to come back. The thing I read last from the Kansas City beat writers when it came to Adalberto Mondesi is their plan was to shut him down completely for 4 weeks and then resume baseball activities and build him back up from there. I don't know if that's their plan or not. It was a 6-week timetable, I think, for Buxton with his boxer's fracture of his left hand. So that again is it's a wait and see. If you have the IL spots, they're definitely worth it because, if they're coming back right around the trade deadline and you're looking for trades to strengthen your team, like you can't get better than Mondesi and Buxton in a trade without giving something significant up. So they might be better than anybody you can trade for. So my advice is to hang on to them, keep them on your IL if you have that as a stash option, and then hope when they come back, they're still producing the way they were pre-injury because, you could get a speed guy. You could get like John Birdie or Jazz Chisholm in Miami if you're willing to pay for it, or Robbie Grossman is somebody who's stealing in Detroit. There's the Fraley kid out of Seattle. These guys who are stealing bags, but they don't have the pedigree or the track record of those two when healthy, and B, you're going to have to give up stuff. Where if you just have them on your IL, when they come off the IL, you can just drop whoever your lowest performing players are at that point, and you didn't have to trade any of your other strengths to address it. So I would even argue that you should try to trade for Mondesi or Buxton now with hopes that they come back and help you when the time is right. Should I hang on to Ross Stripling? I would. He was pitching really well in Toronto. I think he got lit up in his last start. It doesn't help that he's pitching in Buffalo for their home games because that's supposed to not be the greatest pitcher's park. But, if he can keep his ERA under 4, he can get you almost a strikeout per inning, keep the walks down. His whip won't be terrible. He'll get you wins because that Toronto offense is pretty impressive and can put up runs in bunches when you're talking about, Springer and Bichette and Guerrero and Hernandez and Biggio and Lourdes Gurriel and Randall Grichuk. Like that's an impressive group of players that are aggressive and hit the ball well. So I would hang on to him. It depends what's on your waiver wire. If you can get somebody better or you're getting offered trades for him, then you get rid of him. But unless there's something better out there, why wouldn't you hang on to Ross Stripling? Who was your worst drop of the season? I'm sad to say I dropped Cedric Mullins in early May to hang on to Grichuk, Bellinger, Soto, Tapia, and Mancini. Yes, Cedric Mullins to me is right behind Jesse Winker in terms of fantasy MVP from places you didn't expect it. Cedric Mullins is almost on a 30-30 pace in Baltimore with over a 300 average. And and it doesn't look like a fluke. His strikeout numbers aren't high. His on-base percentage is good. It's not because of a high batting average on balls in play. It seems like he's just turned himself into a really good leadoff hitter. He might not get you all the RBIs, but he is certainly somebody who is just legit and tearing the cover off the ball. Although, to be honest, looking at the other ones you kept, Tapia and Grichuk might be the only two I would have said, yeah, I might have dropped them instead. I mean, in May, you're not going to drop Cody Bellinger. You still believe him. Juan Soto got off to a slow start, but it's still Juan Soto, man. You're not going to drop Juan Soto. Trey Mancini was tearing the cover off the ball to start the season, and he's this great comeback story with he came back from stage 3 colon cancer, for those of you who don't know it, and he's just been an awesome story. He's to me, both emotionally and his performance have earned him the comeback player of the year. I don't think there's any reason why you would consider anything else, anyone else. And so it is a regrettable drop. Who did I drop that I regret? Well, I dropped Chad Green about a week and a half ago in one of my leagues, and somebody else scooped him up, and he might now be the closer in New York. So that's one that's certainly regrettable. I owned Jazz Chisholm in one league and dropped him. I dropped Dansby Swanson in a league, and he's starting to hit the ball well. So there's a few guys who I dropped when I shouldn't have. But, that's fantasy baseball. For all the ones like last year, I picked up Teoscar Hernandez and Randy Arozarena on a whim in like September or August, because I was like, oh, they're doing okay. And they just were insanely good and helped carry me to a second place finish. I didn't think either of them were keepers this year, but you ride the hot hand. Cedric Mullins might be a keeper going forward. So that one might burn you better. Jazz Chisholm might end up being a keeper in the league I'm in that I dropped him. So there's always the chance that you make that play. You have to live with that stuff because, for every one of those, there's the diamond in the rough that you pick up, like Chris Taylor this year, who's been always a solid contributor, but never a standout in LA. And now he's playing like an everyday player. And you could have gotten him, in the last rounds of the draft. So since Margot is on the 10-day IL, will the Rays call up Vidal Brujan for a little depth? I hope so. Vidal Brujan is in AAA Durham, the Durham Bulls in Tampa Bay, second baseman by trade, although they've been playing him some in the outfield last I read. He's a power speed guy. The problem is from what I read, he's been slumping a lot the last few weeks. If he's not hitting well, I don't think they're necessarily going to call him up, because the truth is the Rays have depth all over the place, and they have this training regimen or program at their facilities that get people to play multiple positions anyway. So they can make up for it. They'd probably bring up, if they're going to bring up anybody, it would be Shane Baz, the pitcher in AAA, who's just lighting the world on fire right now. His numbers are insane. I think he had like 69 strikeouts to 5 walks in his last 6 or 7 starts, which is nuts, because they need more pitching depth, because they lost Glasnow for the season, most likely. They say he might make it back, but I doubt it. They traded away Blake Snell. They let Charlie Morton walk. They've had kind of this closer by committee sort of thing with Fireisen and Diego Castilla and some others. So they tend to use pitchers more and need the depth in their bullpen and in their rotation more. So I would expect Baz to be called up before Vidal Brujan, although Brujan's an exciting prospect. Someone in my league says Merrifield isn't worth DJ LeMahieu. Well, wow. I disagree with that. Someone, I agree with, if you're saying Merrifield is worth LeMahieu, certainly this year he's like light years better than DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu has like a 340 slugging, which is terrible. And he's normally a batting average and runners in scoring position guy, and he's not doing either well this year. Whereas Whit Merrifield, I think, is leading the American League in steals, batting over 300. He scores a ton of runs. He has some pop to get it over the fence, not a tremendous amount, but enough to make him useful. So I mean, if you asked me who I would take, I'd take Whit. If somebody offered me Whit Merrifield for DJ LeMahieu, I wouldn't hesitate to accept it. To drop oh dear, the Trevor Bauer question. Trevor Bauer is in a lot of hot water right now. For those of you who aren't aware, he's right now on 7-day administrative leave or something like that from MLB, because there's accusations of assaulting a woman back in the beginning of the calendar year. And some of the details, I won't discuss them because I don't like talking about that stuff, but they're pretty gruesome. And I think Dave Roberts came out yesterday and said they don't expect him back when his 7-day administrative leave is over because of the MLB investigation. If he gets the 80-game domestic violence suspension, which is certainly possible, we're almost 80 games into the season, if not already. So if that's the case and it's a redraft league, yeah, I think you drop him. If it's a keeper league, it becomes a trickier question because he is one of the 5 or 10 best pitchers in baseball. And the question is, how do you hang on to him, and whether you can. For your team morale, if you're a team chemistry guy and like to have, kind of good moral character on your team, he might not fit that very well. But fantasy baseball is a business, and so some people will keep him no matter what. Sam Jacobowitz, hey man, welcome back. I like that you always come onto mine. I don't know if you go on to other people's, but you're always there for me. And so I appreciate you more than everybody else, certainly more than Ross and Dan do. So keep hitting me up. Jared Walsh and Cedric Mullins are certainly, they might be the two biggest hits of fantasy baseball, other than maybe Shohei Ohtani at the utility position, because they are both, Cedric Mullins was unknown. I'm not going to sit here and say I saw Cedric Mullins as potential. I didn't. And certainly in our preview shows that we did before the season, I don't think he was listed in our top 30 outfielders or our sleepers. But Jared Walsh, we did talk about. Jared Walsh had a good 2020. He put up some numbers. There were questions about whether he would be able to repeat it. I think he proved everybody wrong. Excuse me while I deal with that. And now he's tearing the cover off the ball so much that they got rid of Albert Pujols to keep him. And so Mazel Tov, I'm Jewish, Mazel Tov, and you're Jacobowitz. I'm not sure if you are or not, but it sounds close enough to me. So Mazel Tov to you for making those picks. I'm going to cough again. All right. A little crazy, but what do you think I can get out of Ohtani? I'm not in contention in my dynasty league and want to start rebuilding. I started trading for next year already, seeing how much I can get. If Ohtani has outfield eligibility, and I'm assuming we're talking about Ohtani the hitter, not Ohtani the pitcher. Ohtani the pitcher, he doesn't have a lot of value. I don't think you can get a lot for him because he's too inconsistent in his starts. He can be electric, but then he can go less than an inning and give up 7 runs. And he doesn't start every 5 days. Usually it's 6. And they'll skip a start every now and then so he doesn't get too tired. But Ohtani, the batter, I think you can get a ton, especially from a contender in your league. I would assume that it depends what you want. If you're looking at position players, I'm trying to think who you couldn't get. Obviously, you couldn't get the Acuñas. You couldn't get any of the top 5 or 6 position players. But outside of that, if he has outfield eligibility, you might even be able to get you can't get the Trout, the Betts, the Acuña, although you might be able to get Mookie Betts this year even. So that's a hard answer. I would dangle it out there and see what offers you got. For a team like mine, my team in one of my leagues is in 2nd or 3rd place, but my weakness is in runs scored and RBIs. I'm dominating the pitching, but my runs scored and RBIs are low. Home runs are in the average. So somebody like Ohtani on my roster, because I have some underperformers in Harper and Yelich and Adalberto Mondesi and Byron Buxton that are keeping my offense down. Somebody like Ohtani would be a huge chip for me and would make it easy for me to trade a lot to get him, especially if he had outfield eligibility. Tommy Pham has been fantastic. Hasn't he? I thought he was terrible the last 2 weeks. Let me just check. You're fantastic, Ross, but I don't think Tommy Pham has been. Let's see. Pham. Let's look at the last 2 weeks total. He's batting .222 with 3 home runs, 8 runs scored, and 7 RBIs. He's ranked 153. So that's not, don't get me wrong. Top 150 is not terrible, but I wouldn't call it fantastic. How's that? So I think you're wrong. Let's see. I'm a little upset that Tony Todd didn't come back at me in the Bellinger Wander Franco debate. He clearly was just doing it for shock value and didn't have any substance behind him. So he knew he wouldn't win that argument. So we'll have that another time. Let's go with, what is the only thing keeping Ohtani from repeating these numbers next year? Well, look, I think Ohtani is, as we've talked about several times, a fantastic baseball player who's one of the best hitters in the league right now, certainly one of the hottest hitters. And his track record in Japan was that good. He was projected to be kind of this Ruthian figure in Japan. But to say, is health the only thing holding him back from putting up those kind of numbers? To expect somebody to hit 31 home runs before the All-Star break every year, I think is just, I mean, there's got to be some natural regression. So, but I do think he's a safe bet for a 270 to 280 average with 30 to 45 home runs every year, who's going to steal you maybe a couple dozen bags. I don't know. Like, he's that good. But it becomes troublesome because he's also pitching. And so that he has more exposure to injuries than a typical fielding player does because he pitches also. And so if he gets hurt as a pitcher, it puts him on the shelf as a batter. It's just a tricky balance. So far, the Angels have been fantastic, or fantastic, as Ross likes to say, in managing that so that he's been healthy. But there is always the risk of more injuries. There's also just the risk that the pitchers figure out a hole in his swing and start to exploit it. We've seen it happen numerous times. Look at Cody Bellinger. If 2 years ago, Cody Bellinger was Shohei Ohtani in 2019, pretty much, with the numbers he was putting up. And look at him now. So there's always the chance that he's on a super hot run and it doesn't stay. Do I think Dan Ratner is the greatest fantasy player I've ever seen? Well, I have known Dan for 23 years now. He and I go way back. For those of you who don't know, we're both psychologists. We met in graduate school. So if you have any mental health questions, I guess you can ask those too, particularly with your anxiety and depression related to your fantasy sports team. And I've played fantasy sports with Dan for 14 or 15 years. I think in fantasy baseball, he absolutely is one of the strongest fantasy baseball players I've seen. His team is struggling this year in the league I'm in, but it seems like at least every other year he was winning the league. And so I am not going to throw shade at him or make fun of him. Fantasy baseball, he's fantastic. Fantasy hockey, he even won this year, and he doesn't know much about hockey. So if you can win a sport the first year you were learning about it, it means you're probably just a pretty good fantasy player. Although I will throw, fantasy football has not been his strength. He played better this past year, but he struggled with that throughout the year. So I think he's one of the best overall fantasy players, but if I had to pick a weakness, it would be fantasy football. Let's see, Dan is playing in a basketball league again. Will he get a tryout with the Cavs? Man, he's tall. He's like 6'4", 6'5", which is tall by, middle-aged white Jewish standards, which is what he is. And so I don't think he's going to get a tryout, though. He doesn't quite have the same vertical. He has a decent mid-range jump shot, but he in my experience, when I used to play him, now again, that was 20 years ago, he didn't like the more physical or dirty aspects of basketball. And so he'd get pushed around a lot. He's a tall, kind of skinny guy. So I think he'd be pushed around too much. Maybe not the Cavs. Although, who knows? He might be in the D League or G League or whatever it's called now. And if he gets hot from three, he can be that guy who stands out there in the corner just waiting to take a shot. Similar to Kevin Love, it looks like. So the Cavs have a history with those players. So he might be able to do it. Let's go for it. Carlos Carrasco, is he worth an open IL spot? I just heard he started a throwing program again, or through a simulated game. He was part of that big Francisco Lindor trade that everybody thought the Mets killed it on, getting both of them, but he's been battling injuries ever since and hasn't thrown a pitch. If you have an open IL spot, I certainly think he's one of the ones worth owning. I don't know if he's going to contribute this year. I might rather have him than some of the other guys who are IL stashes. Certainly Noah Syndergaard on his team. I don't know if he's coming back this year. Who knows if Tyler Glasnow is going to make it back. So that's another one. But if he comes back, I think he could be great in the National League if he's the same pitcher he was last year. I would stash him, and then when he came back, I would hold on to him for a few starts to see how he's doing. And if he's doing great, then I'd put him in my starting lineup. If not, I would let him kind of sit there. So not somebody I would necessarily avoid, at least for that call. Let's see. Mitch Haniger or Adam Duvall. Who do we like? It's a head-to-head 10-team category league. Well, the way Duvall is hitting the cover off the ball right now, I like him. Both of them are kind of streamer type of players. Haniger started off the season incredible. He hasn't maintained the same level of production, but he's been really good. I don't know. Is he hurt right now? Because I feel like every year he gets hurt. He's another one who has kind of chronic back issues, if I'm remembering correctly. And Adam Duvall has shown when he was with the Reds or wherever else he's been that he's got the power. He's on a team that's going to play him. Miami's not going to play anybody else over him, and they're not going to look to trade for an upgrade there. So I would probably go with Duvall right now. If I had them both, I would have Haniger probably on the bench. I like I like the way Duvall's playing right now, so I would go with him. Who's the better third baseman moving forward? Alec Bohm of the Phillies or J.D. Davis of the Mets? Ooh, I don't like either of them. I don't know if that's fair to say. J.D. Davis, Alec Bohm, I think, obviously is younger, has a higher upside. J.D. Davis is the more proven commodity. He's going to be playing, to me, in a better lineup in New York than Philadelphia. But Philadelphia is a better hitter's park. I mean, it can go in every direction. And Alec Bohm doesn't get it to hit against his own bullpen, and J.D. Davis will, which might bode well for J.D. Davis. I would probably lean in a redraft league towards J.D. Davis. In a keeper league or dynasty league, I would lean Alec Bohm for the guy I'd want on my team going forward. But both are capable of hitting home runs. Both are capable of a decent average. Neither have a lot of speed. Philadelphia is not scoring a tremendous amount of runs, and it seems like Dom Smith has gotten hot. Lindor might have found his stroke a little bit. You got Pete Alonso's knocking in runs left and right the past couple of weeks. So J.D. Davis might walk into a better production scenario when he comes off the injured list than Alec Bohm has right now in Philadelphia. So that would be where I would probably lean. Bobby Witt is being called up today. Is that true? Ross, if that's true, please tell me it's true, because that's about as exciting of a news as we'll get today in baseball. Bobby Witt is the number 2 overall prospect, pretty much behind Wander Franco, and was just electric in the spring. They thought he should break with the team. Many people thought he was the best player and almost in spring training, certainly for the Royals. And with Mondesi hurt, there's an opening at shortstop for him to walk right in. He's got prodigious power and bat to ball skills. He can swipe a bag. I mean, he's a double digit, maybe 20 plus steals a game kind of guy. And he seems to have that kind of swag, that it factor that will allow him to not be intimidated by being up in the majors. Oh gosh, Ross, have you played one-on-one against Dan? Cause you're really convinced he's going to enter the draft. Who would he get drafted by? If I had to pick a team that he would seem to fit with right now, I think, who would he be a good fit with? I think he'd be a good fit with the Celtics. The Celtics, like the tall, lanky, not quite elite athletes. A rumor you made up on Bobby Witt. Oh, see, you got me excited, and then you break my heart. I don't know what to tell you. But it would be cool if it happens, and hopefully it happens before the end of the year. Although if that does, that would be maybe my greatest regret trade of the year so far. If you remember 2 to 3 months ago, if you were watching, probably 2 months ago now, I traded Bobby Witt Jr., Alec Bohm, Freddie Peralta, and Ryan Presley for Chris Bryant when Chris Bryant was appearing to find his old form of a few years ago. Chris Bryant has cooled off. Freddie Peralta has continued to be great. Ryan Presley is a really solid closer who's doing fine in Houston, and Houston might be the hottest team in baseball right now. Alec Bohm has continued to struggle. He was my starting third baseman. That's why I wanted the upgrade. But if I had it to do over again, I don't know if I'd make that trade. Certainly if Bobby Witt Jr. gets called up, because I'm one of those kids who just loves the prospects and loves the idea of that young and exciting team. So I hope he gets called up, though, because I just like watching the best players play baseball. Well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you again for your questions. Sam, Ross, Jack, Tony, all of your questions were great. I appreciate you spending a little time with me and talking fantasy baseball. I'll talk it all day if you'll let me. I got to talk about my Yankees, and as disappointing as they are for me, I still love watching the Yankees play baseball. So to everybody out there, I hope you have tremendous success in your fantasy sports season. As always, subscribe to our channel, click the link for notifications, ring the bell for notifications, type any comments. Either Ross, Dan, and I will respond to all of them. We love interacting with you guys, and we can't wait to see you soon. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Oh, yeah. From Kill Cliff, the #1 clean energy drink in the mind of Joe Rogan, comes the Flamin' Joe. Sugar-free, B vitamins, electrolytes, all them good drink things. An epic spicy pineapple fusion from out of this world, straight into your drink hole. Own it. Kill Cliff.